The crystal hummed with desperate energy as Zephyrian technician Kyle Thor pressed his four-fingered hands against its pulsing surface. Around him, the emergency command center of the orbital station buzzed with frantic activity. Alarms wailed their endless song of doom while holographic displays showed the approaching enemy fleet in stark, terrifying detail. "How long until the Devourers reach our position?" Admiral Nixara asked, her usually pristine silver scales dulled with stress. Her gill slits fluttered rapidly, a sure sign of panic among her people. 18 standard hours, Admiral," replied Communications Officer Veltar, his insectoid eyes clicking as they processed multiple data streams. "Our defensive fleet has been completely destroyed. The outer colonies have gone silent. We're the last stronghold between them and the home world." The Devourer fleet stretched across space like a plague of metal locusts. Their biomechanical ships pulsed with organic hatred, consuming everything in their path. Entire civilizations had fallen to their endless hunger for resources and life force. The Zephyrian Confederacy, once proud masters of 3 star systems, now faced extinction. "What about the distress signals?" Nixara demanded. "Has anyone responded?" "The Altarian Empire sent their regrets but claims they're dealing with their own Devourer incursion," Veltar reported, mandibles clicking with frustration. "The Cosmic Federation offered thoughts and prayers but no actual ships. The remaining governments are either too far away or too afraid to help." Kelthor looked up from his crystal array, his large purple eyes reflecting the chaotic light of the displays. "Admiral, there is one more option. The ancient summoning protocols." Every being in the command center turned toward him. The summoning protocols were legend, stories told to children about the old days when civilizations could call upon mysterious forces for aid. Most considered them myths. "Explain," Nixara ordered. "My great-grandfather was an archaeologist," Kelthor began, his voice trembling slightly. "He spent decades studying pre-space civilizations and their communication methods. According to his research, there were universal distress frequencies that could reach across dimensional barriers to contact unknown species willing to help." "That's impossible," scoffed Chief Scientist Dr. Morvex, her tentacles writhing dismissively. "The energy requirements alone would be astronomical. Unless you use a dying star as a power source," Kelthor countered. "The red giant in the Kepler system is only 2 jumps away. If we can channel its energy through the quantum crystals and broadcast on the ancient frequencies." "You're talking about necromantic star manipulation," Veltar whispered. "The legends say it opens doorways to realms unknown." Admiral Nixara looked at the tactical display showing the inexorable advance of the Devourer fleet. Their ships moved like a swarm of predatory insects, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. Traditional weapons had proven useless against their adaptive armor. Conventional tactics had failed completely. "How long would it take to set up this summoning?" she asked. 6 hours to reach Kepler, 4 hours to establish the connection, and 30 minutes for the actual transmission, Kelthor calculated quickly. "We'd have about 7 hours before the Devourers arrive." "And what exactly would we be summoning?" Kelthor's expression grew uncertain. "Unknown entities from parallel dimensions. The ancient texts speak of warriors from beyond the veil who answer calls for justice. But, Admiral, there's no guarantee what will come through, or if they'll be friendly to us." The command center fell silent except for the persistent alarms. Everyone understood the terrible choice before them. They could face certain destruction from the Devourers, or risk everything on a desperate gamble that might bring something even worse. "Sir," Veltar interrupted quietly, "long-range sensors are picking up Devourer scout ships. They're moving faster than expected. We now have 16 hours, not 18. Nixara closed her eyes and took a deep breath through her gills. When she opened them again, her resolve was steel. "All department heads, prepare for emergency departure to the Kepler system," We're going to try this ancient summoning. May the cosmic winds forgive us for what we're about to unleash." 3 hours later, the hastily assembled flotilla of 7 surviving ships jumped through hyperspace toward the dying red giant. The journey passed in tense silence as technicians worked frantically to construct the summoning array according to Kyle Thor's ancestors' notes. The Kepler system was a graveyard of worlds. The red giant had expanded beyond its former habitable zone, consuming 2 planets and turning the others into barren rocks. But its dying nuclear heart contained exactly the kind of exotic energy they needed. "Crystal array in position," reported Chief Engineer Yixon from the lead construction vessel. "We're tapping directly into the star's core through quantum tunneling. Energy levels are unprecedented." "Is it safe?" Nixara asked. "Define safe," Yixon replied grimly. "We're channeling the power of a dying star through experimental technology based on archaeological notes. If something goes wrong, we'll either open a hole in space-time or get vaporized instantly." "Comforting," the Admiral muttered. "How long until we can begin the summoning?" Kael'thor looked up from his calculations, his face pale with concentration. "The ancient frequency modulations are incredibly complex. They're not just broadcasting a message. They're creating a resonance pattern that should theoretically align with entities in parallel dimensions who possess both the capability and willingness to provide military aid." "Should theoretically," repeated Dr. Morvex. "I want it noted in the official record that this plan violates approximately 37 laws of physics." "Noted," Nixara replied dryly. "Proceed with the summoning." The massive crystal array began to glow as stellar energy flowed through its carefully arranged geometric patterns. The ancient symbols that Kael'thor had painstakingly recreated from his great-grandfather's notes started to pulse with their own light. Space itself seemed to shimmer around the construct. "Energy cascade stable," reported Yixon. "Quantum resonance achieving harmonic alignment. Admiral, we're actually doing this. We're opening a doorway to somewhere else." Kael'thor's hands danced over the control interface as he fine-tuned the frequency modulations. "Broadcasting now on all ancient channels. The message is simple. We are under attack by forces of absolute evil. We request aid from any who value justice and life. Our coordinates follow." The transmission pulsed out through dimensions unknown, carrying with it the desperate hope of a dying civilization. For several minutes, nothing happened except the steady drain of stellar energy through their makeshift apparatus. Then the universe answered. The response came not as a message but as a presence. Something vast and determined pressed against the barriers between dimensions, seeking entry. The crystal array began to resonate with harmonics that made every being's bones ache. "I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies," Veltar announced, his compound eyes wide with shock. "Something is trying to break through from elsewhere." "Is it the Devourers?" Nixara demanded. "Could they have intercepted our signal?" "No, Admiral," Kael'thor replied, studying the energy patterns with growing amazement. "This is something else entirely. The resonance signatures are completely different. Whatever's coming through, it's responding to our call for help." Space began to tear. It started as a small distortion, barely visible against the backdrop of stars. Then it grew, spreading like a crack in reality itself. Through the widening gap, they could see something moving in the darkness beyond. "Multiple contacts emerging from the dimensional breach," Veltar reported, his voice filled with awe. "Ships, Admiral. Lots of them. They're actually coming through." The first vessel to emerge was unlike anything in the Zephyrian databases. It was roughly wedge-shaped, but covered in angular armor that seemed to absorb light. Weapon ports dotted its hull like the eyes of some mechanical predator. Most disturbing of all, it was massive, easily 10 times larger than their largest battleship. Then came another, and dozens more. "By the cosmic winds," Dr. Morvex whispered. "What have we summoned?" The alien fleet that emerged from the dimensional rift was a terrifying sight to behold. Their ships moved with predatory grace, taking up formation with military precision that spoke of vast experience in warfare. Energy signatures indicated weapons systems beyond Zephyrian understanding. "Incoming transmission," Veltar announced, his voice barely steady. It's coming from the lead vessel." "Put it through," Nyxera ordered, though her hand instinctively moved to her sidearm. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a face that made every Zephyrian in the command center step back in shock. The creature was bipedal but built like a warrior from nightmares. Its features were angular and hard, with predatory eyes that seemed to evaluate everything as either threat or asset. But most unnerving of all was the intelligence behind those eyes and something else, something that might have been compassion. "This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen of the Terran Colonial Navy," the creature said in perfect galactic standard, somehow having learned their language in the few minutes since emerging. "We received your distress call across dimensional barriers. We're here to help. Please transmit enemy disposition, tactical analysis, and civilian evacuation priorities." Admiral Nyxera found herself staring at the alien commander. Everything about him radiated competence and deadly capability. His uniform was clean and professional, but she could see weapon systems integrated into his armor and the kind of scars that came from serious combat experience. You actually came," she managed to say. "We sent a desperate plea into the void and you came. When someone calls for help against genocidal forces, humans answer," Admiral Chen replied simply. "It's what we do. Now, how long do we have before these devourers arrive? And what can you tell us about their capabilities?" As Admiral Nyxera began to relay information about the approaching threat, she couldn't help but wonder what kind of beings these humans were. They had crossed dimensional barriers to answer a stranger's call for help, bringing a fleet that dwarfed anything she had ever seen. The question was whether they were salvation or simply a different kind of doom. The Terran fleet continued to emerge from the dimensional rift, ship after ship of various classes and configurations. Fighter craft swarmed between the larger vessels like schools of metallic fish, while support ships began immediate tactical scans of the system. "Admiral Chen," Nyxera ventured, "may I ask why you answered our call? Your people could have ignored our signal and remained safely in your own dimension." The human admiral's expression grew grim. "Because we know what it's like to face extinction. We know what it means to have nowhere left to run, and we know that evil triumphs when good beings do nothing." He paused, studying the tactical displays that his crew was rapidly compiling. "Besides, we humans have a saying, 'The enemy of my enemy is my friend.' If these devourers are half as bad as your data suggests, then destroying them serves everyone's interests." "Your ships," Chief Scientist Dr. Morvex interjected, unable to contain her curiosity. "They're unlike anything in our databases. What kind of weapons technology do you possess?" Admiral Chen's smile was not entirely reassuring. "The kind that makes problems go away permanently. Don't worry, Doctor. We've dealt with species-ending threats before. These devourers are about to learn why humans are considered the apex predators of our dimension." As if responding to some unheard signal, the human fleet began to move into battle formation. Their ships spread out in complex patterns that spoke of tactical doctrine refined through countless conflicts. Energy signatures spiked as weapon systems came online, revealing destructive capabilities that made Nyxera's surviving fleet look like toys by comparison. The dimensional rift finally sealed with a sound like reality healing itself, leaving the combined fleets alone in the Kepler system with the dying red giant casting its ominous light across their hulls. In the distance, space itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the devourers to arrive and discover that this time, their prey had found guardians. The War Council convened aboard the human flagship, a massive vessel called the Determination. Admiral Nixara and her senior staff found themselves in a conference room that looked more like a fortress command center than a ship's meeting space. Armored walls displayed tactical information in 3 dimensions, while human officers moved with the fluid efficiency of a species born for conflict. "Enemy fleet composition analysis complete," reported Captain Sarah Morrison, Admiral Chen's tactical officer. She was shorter than most humans, but carried herself with the same predatory confidence as her superior. "The Devourers are fielding approximately 200 vessels of various classes. Biomechanical construction with adaptive armor that learns from previous attacks." Admiral Nix Ara studied the holographic display showing the approaching enemy fleet. Even knowing that powerful allies now stood with them, the sight of so many Devourer ships still filled her with dread. "Their standard tactic is to overwhelm defenses through sheer numbers while their capital ships drain energy from everything nearby. They consume both technology and life force to strengthen themselves." "Fascinating," Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the human fleet's xenobiologist, interjected. She was examining tissue samples that Nixara had provided from previous Devourer encounters. "Their ships aren't just biomechanical, they're actually alive, parasitic life forms that have learned to construct technological shells. No wonder conventional weapons have limited effectiveness." Admiral Chen leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "How do they handle electromagnetic pulse weapons?" "We've never tried EMP attacks," admitted Chief Scientist Dr. Morvex. "Our defensive doctrine focused on kinetic and energy weapons." "Mistake number 1, Chen replied. "Living systems require bioelectrical processes to function. Disrupt those processes and you disrupt the organism." He turned to his communications officer. "Signal all ships. Prepare EMP torpedoes and electromagnetic warfare packages. If these things are alive, we're going to give them the worst headache in galactic history." Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez, the fleet's intelligence officer, had been studying the Devourer tactical patterns. "Admiral, their attack formations are interesting. They move like a hive mind, with perfect coordination between vessels. But that could also be a weakness." "Explain," Nixara requested. "Hive minds typically rely on a central control node," Rodriguez continued. "If we can identify and eliminate their command structure, the entire fleet might become disorganized." Dr. Harper looked up from her microscopic analysis. "Based on these tissue samples, I concur. The biomechanical integration suggests a networked consciousness. They're not individual ships working together, they're components of a single massive organism." Admiral Chen stood and walked to the tactical display, his hands clasped behind his back. "So we have a living fleet that feeds on energy and operates as a hive mind. Their strength is their coordination and adaptability. Their weakness is their dependence on central control and their vulnerability to bioelectrical disruption." "Admiral," interrupted communications specialist Maria Santos, "the Devourer fleet has entered the outer system. They're moving in their standard consumption pattern, surrounding all possible escape routes." The display updated to show the enemy positions. The Devourers had indeed formed a massive sphere around the Kepler system, closing off every hyperspace exit point. Their ships pulsed with hungry energy as they prepared for another massacre. "Time to intercept?" Chen asked. 4 hours at current approach speed," Captain Morrison replied. "They're being cautious, probably wondering why we're not trying to run." "Good," Chen said with satisfaction. "Let them wonder. Captain Morrison, deploy the fleet in defensive formation around the planet. Make it look like we're planning a last stand. Lieutenant Rodriguez, begin deep scans of their fleet. I want that command node identified." "Admiral," Nixara interjected hesitantly, "with respect, your fleet is impressive, but you're still outnumbered 4-1. The Devourers have consumed dozens of civilizations. They've never been defeated in open combat. Admiral Chen turned to face the Zephyrian admiral, and for the first time since meeting him, Nixara saw something in his eyes that chilled her to the bone. It wasn't fear or uncertainty. It was the cold calculation of a predator who had found worthy prey. "Admiral Nixara," he said quietly, "you summoned us because your people were facing extinction. You called across dimensional barriers for help because everything you tried had failed. You reached out to us because you had nowhere else to turn." He paused, letting the words sink in. "What you didn't know is that you called the one species in the multiverse that considers impossible odds to be a personal challenge." Captain Morrison smiled, and Nixara noticed that humans showed their teeth when they were pleased about something violent. "Admiral, the humans have a saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. These Devourers are about to learn why our species conquered our entire dimension." Dr. Harper continued her analysis of the Devourer samples while the tactical discussion continued. "Admiral Chen, I'm detecting some interesting properties in these organisms. They appear to be highly susceptible to certain radiation frequencies. If we could coordinate our attacks—" "Already on it, Doctor," Chen interrupted. "All human ships are equipped with variable frequency weapons. We can adjust our output to match whatever frequency causes them the most distress." Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from his scanner array. "Admiral, I think I've found their command node. There's a massive vessel at the center of their formation, approximately 5 times larger than their standard capital ships. It's generating the coordination signals for the entire fleet." "Distance and defensive screening?" Morrison asked. 47 enemy vessels forming a protective shell around the command ship. They're keeping it well guarded." Admiral Chen studied the tactical display for several minutes, his mind clearly working through complex battle plans. Finally, he turned to his staff with a smile that made several Zephyrians step back nervously. "Gentlemen, ladies, honored allies," he began. "We're going to do something that military theorists would call impossible. We're going to punch through 47 hostile capital ships, destroy a heavily defended command vessel, and eliminate an entire enemy fleet with minimal casualties to our forces." "How?" Nixara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "By doing what humans do best," Chen replied. "We're going to cheat." 2 hours before the estimated contact time, Admiral Chen implemented the first phase of his plan. The human fleet suddenly dispersed, spreading out across the system in what appeared to be a panicked retreat formation. To the watching Devourers, it must have looked like the defenders were finally coming to their senses and trying to run. "They're taking the bait," Rodriguez reported. "The Devourer fleet is accelerating to intercept before we can escape. They're breaking their containment formation." "Perfect," Chen said. "Phase 2, initiate." Suddenly, space around the system began to shimmer. The humans had deployed some kind of cloaking technology that made dozens of additional ships appear from nowhere. What had seemed like 50 human vessels was actually over 200. "Temporal displacement generators," Dr. Harper explained to the shocked Zephyrians. "We hid half our fleet in accelerated time pockets. They were here all along, just moving too fast for normal sensors to detect." But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. "Phase 3. Deploy the Kraken protocols." Nixara had no idea what Kraken protocols meant, but she was about to find out. Several of the largest human ships suddenly began to transform. Armor plating shifted and reconfigured, revealing massive weapons systems that had been hidden within the hull structures. What had appeared to be exploration vessels were actually battleships in disguise. "Admiral," Captain Morrison announced with obvious satisfaction, "all Kraken-class dreadnoughts are weapons-free and ready for engagement." "How many ships do you actually have?" Dr. Morvex asked in amazement. "Enough," Admiral Chen replied simply. "Now, Let's show these devourers what happens when they threaten innocent lives. The human fleet moved to engage with a precision that defied belief. Their ships flowed through space like schools of deadly fish, each vessel perfectly coordinated with every other. It was as if the entire fleet shared a single mind, but unlike the devourers, this was a mind trained for strategic thinking rather than simple consumption. The first wave of devourer ships met the human advance head-on, confident in their numerical superiority and adaptive defenses. They had faced thousands of species and learned to counter every known weapon system, but they had never faced humans before. The human EMP torpedoes struck first, sending waves of electromagnetic energy through the biomechanical devourer hulls. The effect was immediate and devastating. Ships that had survived the combined firepower of entire civilizations suddenly went dark as their biological components seized up in bioelectrical overload. Direct hit on 17 targets, Morrison reported. Enemy ships are experiencing massive system failures. Their organic components are going into shock. But the devourers adapted quickly, as they always did. Their ships began generating electromagnetic shielding, protecting their biological systems from further EMP attacks. It was an impressive display of their adaptive capabilities. Unfortunately for them, Admiral Chen had anticipated this response. Phase 4, he announced calmly. Implement frequency cycling. The human weapons suddenly began changing their attack patterns faster than the devourers could adapt. Energy beams shifted from electromagnetic to gravitational to quantum disruption to exotic particle bombardment, each change coming before the enemy could develop new defenses. Impossible, whispered Dr. Morvex. They're changing weapon frequencies faster than the devourers can evolve countermeasures. Evolution takes time, Admiral Chen explained. Adaptation requires analysis and modification. We're simply attacking faster than they can think. The battle became a masterpiece of tactical execution. The human fleet danced through space, their ships weaving complex patterns that kept the devourers constantly off balance. Every time the enemy began to coordinate a response, human forces would shift tactics and strike from an unexpected angle. Lieutenant Rodriguez maintained his focus on the command vessel. Admiral, the enemy command ship is trying to withdraw deeper into their formation. They're starting to realize they're in trouble. Not acceptable, Chen replied. All Kraken-class vessels, prepare for deep strike maneuver. Target the command ship directly. Sir, that means flying through the heart of their fleet, Captain Morrison pointed out. We'll take heavy casualties. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. Sometimes you have to walk through hell to save heaven. Execute the maneuver. The largest human ships suddenly accelerated directly toward the center of the Devourer formation, ignoring the smaller enemy vessels that swarmed around them like angry insects. Their armor absorbed tremendous punishment as energy weapons and biomechanical projectiles hammered their hulls. But the humans had one more surprise. As they reached the heart of the enemy fleet, the Kraken-class dreadnoughts deployed their primary weapons systems. These weren't conventional weapons at all, but reality manipulation devices that could alter local physics. Gravity well generators online, announced the weapons officer aboard the lead dreadnought. Target locked on enemy command vessel. Fire! Admiral Chen ordered. Space itself twisted around the Devourer command ship as artificial gravity wells crushed it from multiple directions simultaneously. The massive biomechanical vessel, which had survived countless battles and consumed the life force of entire worlds, simply collapsed in on itself like a deflating balloon. The effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate and catastrophic. Without their central coordination node, the remaining ships began behaving erratically. Some continued attacking, others fled in random directions, and still others simply stopped moving altogether as their hive-mind connection severed. Enemy fleet is in complete disarray, Rodriguez reported with satisfaction. They've lost all tactical coordination. But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. This is Admiral Chen to all ships. These creatures have committed genocide across dozens of worlds. Today, we make sure they never threaten innocent life again. No survivors, no mercy, no escape. The human fleet fell upon the confused and scattered devourer forces like avenging angels. The battle became less of a fight and more of an extermination as human ships systematically eliminated every single enemy vessel. The devourers, who had seemed invincible just hours before, were reduced to floating debris and fading energy signatures. When the last devourer ship exploded in a brilliant flash of dying biomechanical systems, the Kepler system finally fell silent. The red giant continued its slow death throes, but for the first time in generations, the space around it was free from the threat of consumption. Admiral Nixara found herself staring at the tactical display in complete shock. The entire devourer fleet, 200 ships that had destroyed countless civilizations, had been eliminated in less than 3 hours. Not a single human vessel had been lost, though several showed battle damage. "How?" was all she could manage to say. Admiral Chen looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. "Admiral, your people fought bravely, but you fought like civilized beings trying to preserve something precious. The devourers fought like parasites trying to consume everything they encountered." He paused, his eyes growing distant. "We humans fight like survivors who have learned that sometimes the only way to preserve civilization is to become temporarily uncivilized ourselves." The aftermath of the battle brought an eerie calm to the Kepler system. Debris from the destroyed devourer fleet drifted silently through space, slowly being pulled into the gravity well of the dying red giant. The human fleet had reformed into a protective formation around the surviving Zephyrian vessels, their ships scanning for any remaining threats. Admiral Nixara stood on the observation deck of the Determination, watching human salvage crews work with mechanical precision to clear the battlefield. Each piece of devourer technology was carefully cataloged and either destroyed or contained for study. There would be no chance for the biomechanical horrors to regenerate or spread. "Second thoughts about summoning us?" Admiral Chen asked, joining her at the viewport. His voice carried none of the cold calculation from the battle, instead reflecting something almost gentle. "I'm not sure what to think," Nixara admitted honestly. 3 hours ago, my people faced certain extinction. Now we're safe, but I've witnessed the complete annihilation of an entire species. Your people fight with an efficiency that's both impressive and terrifying." Dr. Elizabeth Harper approached them, carrying a data pad filled with her analysis of the battle. "Admiral Chen, the Devourer remains confirm what we suspected. They weren't originally a single species at all. They were a collection of parasitic organisms that had learned to work together by consuming and integrating other life forms. In essence, they were a living weapon created from the merged consciousness of thousands of previous victims." "Which means," Nixara prompted. "Which means we didn't commit genocide," Admiral Chen explained. "We performed surgery, removing a cancer that had been consuming the galaxy for generations. Every devourer ship contained the enslaved consciousness of species they had absorbed. We freed them." Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez joined the group, his expression troubled. "Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting something unusual. We're picking up faint signals from the devourer debris field. Not technology signals, but something else." Dr. Harper immediately became animated. "Biosignatures, of course! When the hive mind network collapsed, it would have released the absorbed consciousnesses. They're trying to communicate." The next several hours were spent in careful communication with the liberated consciousness fragments floating in the debris field. Through complex translation protocols, the human scientists managed to establish contact with representatives of dozens of species that the devourers had consumed over the centuries. The stories they told were heartbreaking. Entire civilizations absorbed not just for their technology and resources, but for their knowledge and memories. The Devourers had been building a collective intelligence by forcibly merging every species they encountered, creating a vast hive mind powered by the unwilling cooperation of their victims. The Altarian Empire, the Cosmic Federation, all the major galactic powers, Admiral Nick's era realized with growing horror. They refused to help us not because they were afraid of the Devourers, but because they were already partially absorbed. The hive mind was using their communication networks to coordinate attacks. It's worse than that, Rodriguez added grimly. According to these consciousness fragments, the Devourer fleet we destroyed was just a scouting force. There are 7 more fleets like this one scattered across the galaxy, each one preparing to consume what remains of free civilization. The weight of this revelation settled heavily on everyone present. They had won a great victory, but it was only the beginning of a much larger war. The Devourers had been preparing for a final coordinated assault that would have consumed every remaining free species in the galaxy. Admiral Chen studied the star charts showing the projected locations of the other Devourer fleets. 7 fleets, each one roughly the same size as the force we just destroyed. Approximately 1,400 enemy vessels total, all coordinated through a distributed hive mind network. Can your people handle a threat of that magnitude? Nixara asked hesitantly. Chen's smile was grim but confident. Admiral, you summoned 50 human ships and we eliminated 200 Devourer vessels without losing a single craft. Did you really think 50 ships was our entire fleet? Communications specialist Maria Santos approached with urgent news. Admiral, we're receiving priority transmissions from Terra Command. The dimensional gateway is being reopened. Fleet Admiral Harrison is requesting a full tactical briefing. Fleet Admiral Harrison? Nixara asked. My superior officer, Chen explained. When we crossed dimensional barriers to answer your distress call, we triggered automatic escalation protocols. The Terran Colonial Navy takes threats to innocent life very seriously. Admiral Harrison commands the first interdimensional fleet. How many ships? Dr. Morvex asked nervously. Approximately 12,000 vessels of various classes, Chen replied casually, as if discussing the weather. Plus support fleets from our allied species. When humans decide to solve a problem, we solve it permanently. The dimensional rift reopened near the outer edge of the system, and what emerged made the Zephyrian survivors question their understanding of military power. Ship after ship poured through the gateway, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything they had imagined possible. The fleet that had destroyed the Devourer force suddenly looked small by comparison. Fleet Admiral Harrison's flagship, a massive vessel called the Righteous Fury, dwarfed even the largest human ship from the first group. When Admiral Chen and the Zephyrian representatives were transported aboard for a strategy meeting, they found themselves in a command center that could have served as the Capitol building for most civilizations. Fleet Admiral Harrison was older than Admiral Chen, with gray hair and scars that spoke of decades of military service. But his eyes held the same intelligent compassion that Nixara had noticed in all the humans she had met. Admiral Chen, excellent work on the initial engagement, Harrison began without preamble. Your tactical reports have been distributed throughout the fleet. We now have a complete understanding of Devourer capabilities and weaknesses. Thank you, sir. Admiral Nixara of the Zephyrian Confederacy has been instrumental in providing intelligence on enemy operations. Harrison turned to acknowledge the alien admiral. Admiral Nixara, on behalf of the Terran government and the Human Defense Alliance, please accept our sincere apologies for the suffering your people have endured. The Devourer's reign of terror ends today. You really intend to hunt down all 7 remaining fleets? Nixara asked. Not hunt, Harrison corrected. Eliminate, completely and permanently. These creatures have committed acts of genocide across the galaxy for generations. Justice demands their complete destruction. Dr. Harper presented her analysis of the Devourer network to the expanded command staff. Based on the consciousness fragments we've recovered, the remaining 7 fleets operate as nodes in a larger network. If we can coordinate simultaneous strikes on all 7 locations, we can prevent them from adapting to our tactics or merging into a single super fleet. Impossible, protested one of Harrison's tactical officers. The fleets are scattered across 7 different star systems, some of them hundreds of light years apart. Even with our fastest ships, we couldn't coordinate simultaneous attacks. Not impossible, Admiral Chen interjected. Difficult. There's a difference. Harrison studied the tactical displays showing the locations of all 7 Devourer fleets. We divide our forces into 7 battle groups, each one capable of independent operation. Each group jumps to its target simultaneously, eliminates the Devourer fleet, and jumps back to rendezvous coordinates. Total operation time, 6 hours. The logistics alone would be staggering, Admiral Nixara pointed out. Coordinating 7 separate fleet actions across that much space. Which is why we brought friends, Harrison replied with satisfaction. Additional dimensional rifts began opening throughout the system, and new fleets emerged from each one. Ships bearing the insignia of a dozen different human colonies and allied species joined the growing armada. By the time the last gateway closed, nearly 20,000 vessels filled the space around the Red Giant. The 23rd Colonial Defense Force from Kepler Colony, Harrison announced as each new fleet arrived. The Martian Expeditionary Fleet, the Centauri Border Guard, the Tau Ceti Alliance Navy, and representatives from our allied species, the Andromedans, the Wolfpack Federation, the Crystal Singers, and the Iron Brotherhood. Each allied fleet brought its